Well, welcome to the 700 Club. An historic peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel is getting closer every day. And that comes from the Saudi Crown Prince.
The news comes as Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu addresses the United Nations today in the aftermath of a long-awaited meeting with President Biden. CBN Middle East correspondent Chris Mitchell reports.
Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman told Fox News' Brett Baer Saudi Arabia may normalize relations with Israel.
Every day we get closer. It seems it's for the first time a real one, serious.
Bin Salman told Baer the Palestinian issue is central to the deal.
For us, the Palestinian issue is very important. We need to solve that part, and we have a good negotiations continue. Till now, we got to see where it will go. We hope that it will reach a place that it will ease the life of the Palestinians and get Israel back as a player in the Middle East.
In their first meeting since Prime Minister Netanyahu took office, he told President Biden that with U.S. help, normal relations with Saudi Arabia are within reach.
We can forge a historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and I think such a peace would go a long way, first to advance the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict, achieve reconciliation between the Islamic world and the Jewish state, and advance a genuine peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
In light of the potential agreement and likely Israeli concessions to the Palestinian Authority, Rabbi Leo D., whose wife and two daughters were murdered in a terror attack, wrote an open letter to President Biden and Crown Prince bin Salman, calling on them to require the Palestinian leadership to stop rewarding terrorists. He wrote in part, "It is up to you to demand, as part of the peace agreement that is taking shape, that the Palestinian Authority immediately annul the laws that reward the perpetrators of terrorist acts. My beloved wife and daughters, who never hurt a soul, would still be with me today if the PA was not providing terrorist families with financial incentives." The threat of a nuclear Iran represents an existential threat to both Israel and Saudi Arabia. And bin Salman warned if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, his country will too. Netanyahu encouraged President Biden to continue standing against a nuclear Iran.
I think that's critical. And that shared goal of ours can be best achieved by a credible military threat, crippling sanctions, and supporting the brave men and women of Iran who despise that regime and who are our real partners for a better future.
To help seal the deal, the Biden administration is considering a mutual U.S. defense pact with Saudi Arabia. That would compel the United States to come to the defense of the Desert Kingdom if it's attacked, a proposal that may require Senate approval. If normalization does come between Israel and Saudi Arabia, it has the potential to transform the Middle East. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
It would transform the Middle East. It would bring peace to the entire region. Iran would be isolated in its opposition, so would Hamas and Hezbollah. And they wouldn't have the favor that they currently have with the rest of the Arab world. But if the condition for peace between Saudi Arabia and Israel is solving the Palestinian issue, then I think we've got a long way to go. In other news, parts of the East Coast are under a tropical storm warning this weekend. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. The storm is forecast to make landfall on the North Carolina coast Saturday, but residents will start feeling the impact today. It's predicted to bring tropical storm conditions, including high winds and heavy rains from the southeast to the mid-Atlantic states over the weekend. Some urban and low-lying areas could experience flash flooding. Parts of the North Carolina and Virginia coasts also could experience life-threatening storm surges. Well, here in Washington, Republican infighting over a spending bill to keep the government running is holding up funding for the Pentagon. The row within the GOP ranks is also being called an all-out civil war that threatens military readiness. CBN National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke has the story.
For a second time this week, a faction of Republicans blocked the defense bill from advancing through to debate. While this measure is considered one of the most conservative in history, House GOP leadership has struggled to find the votes to advance it. Earlier this week, 5 Republican congressmen joined Democrats to block the bill from consideration, and Thursday that number rose to 6. the opposition infuriating their peers who are also veterans.
How does this look on the world stage when we can't even, as a country, as a Congress, pass a defense budget? Where do our priorities lie?
Virginia Congresswoman Jen Kiggins is one of many members in her family with military service. She also represents one of the country's largest active duty military populations. Kiggins tells CBN News the people in her district are concerned by what they're seeing on the Hill.
They are my friends. They are my neighbors. They're already struggling with some of the economic challenges. We've got inflation that's still record-breaking. They're still having trouble not only paying regular bills, but if you wanted to buy a new home or a new car, we're seeing interest rates that are higher than ever. Our military lives on fixed incomes. My veterans live on fixed incomes.
The major issue centers around the debt ceiling deal struck in late May between House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and President Biden. In it, the administration agreed to a spending cap. But according to Dakota Wood of the Heritage Foundation, the White House has increasingly requested more money.
So there are those in the Freedom Caucus and in other parts of the Republican Party says, well, wait a minute. If you're going to try to increase spending, in violation of this earlier agreement that we didn't necessarily agree with, but we, went ahead and went along with, then we're going to show again our disagreement by being very much opposed to the current budget negotiations going into the fiscal year.
While Kiggins agrees government spending is out of control, she does not believe the military and national security should be used as leverage.
I understand those frustrations of wanting to cut the top line number down to fiscal year 22 levels and perhaps even lower. But military and defense spending is not the place to be cutting right now, especially with what's going on in the world.
As McCarthy struggles to unite House Republicans, Senate Democrats warn the House spending bill will be dead on arrival, making a government shutdown an even greater possibility. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, Caitlin. Turning overseas, human rights groups fear 120,000 ethnic and Christian Armenians soon could face a genocide. As CBN's Billy Hallowell reports, military attacks by Azerbaijan have residents trying to flee the territory.
Videos and images showing thousands of ethnic Armenians trying to flee Nagorno-Karabakh have shocked human rights activists.
This is a recipe for mass atrocities.
Joel Veldkamp of Christian Solidarity International fears the worst is yet to come for the people living in the landlocked region between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Earlier this week, Azerbaijani forces launched an attack just before an announced truce. Uncertainty still abounds, however.
This is being widely reported as a ceasefire. Many journalists, many observers seem to think that this means that the fighting is over, the violence is over, the danger is over. That is not true at all. This is the most dangerous moment right now.
Veldkamp believes abuse, chaos, and violence against the Armenians will continue now that they've basically surrendered.
The government of the Republic of Artsakh surrendered to the invading forces of Azerbaijan. They agreed to disband all of their self-defense forces, to lay down their weapons, and to hold negotiations on quote-unquote reintegration into Azerbaijan.
Veldkamp's main concern is for the 120,000 occupied Armenians still trapped inside Nagorno-Karabakh.
There has been no electricity for most of the population of Nagorno-Karabakh for 43 hours now. That means that people have not been able to charge their cell phones or their computers. People aren't able to communicate about what's happening to them. Azerbaijani troops have occupied the country. They control most of the main roads. There are many, many villages that are cut off from the rest of Nagorno-Karabakh.
For decades, deadly battles have raged between Armenians and Azerbaijanis over the territory. Last December's blockade reignited those tensions, cutting off residents from food, medicine, and other essential resources.
This is an area of Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh, that has been contested for many years, largely because when the Soviet Union took over Armenia, it carved it up with Azerbaijan and many of the other countries in strange ways. So there's a little area of Armenia. It has historically been filled with Armenians, Armenian cultures, the Christian faith.
Azerbaijan attacked the region 3 years ago, trying to take it over. Curry sees these latest efforts as an attempt to finish that quest.
They're intensifying this and trying to push out all of the ethnic Armenians and Christians within this region.
Experts now fear Armenia, one of Christianity's oldest communities, could face a second genocide if the international community doesn't act fast.
How could we be so far away from our brothers and sisters? How can we be so ignorant about the first Christian nation, about the first nation in the 20th century to experience a real genocide? What is wrong with us?
Veldkamp is encouraging Christians worldwide to pray and call on Western leaders to intervene and save Armenian lives. Billy Hollowell, CBN News.
Thanks, Billy. Gordon, intervention definitely seems like it's needed.
Yes, but how to have that? And will the international community have the will to do it? 100 years ago, under Turkish rule, the Armenian genocide was largely ignored. And curiously, as a fact of history, Hitler used that as an excuse for the final solution, the genocide of the Jewish people in Europe. And he said, well, nobody paid attention to the Armenians, and so no one's going to pay attention to what I'm doing. When you look at genocide, we all have to say, never again. This shouldn't happen on our watch. So as Christians, we need to be very concerned about what is happening to our Christian brothers. It's one of the, if not the oldest Christian community in the world. And when you look at it from that lens, why would we ever allow them to be extinguished? Let's pray. Let's ask God to intervene. Let's ask for miracles. Let's ask for his divine hand to protect them and provide a way out for them. Staying in Azerbaijan is clearly not an option. So how can they find freedom and find a path forward? So let's pray.